So from the view of not two, yeah, what's landed best for me in this body's life is negation. So that's mostly what I share. There's a few things. This is something I notice a lot in non-duality. And some of it maybe comes from a Dwight, I don't know why, but the fact of non-duality is you are what you're looking for, yeah? So negating what you're not is really the movement, because you can't become what you already are. So that's kind of like the clear idea, at least whatever, how I would view that, yeah? So if the individual system, like the body and the mind, are quite frantic, the idea that you are already stillness and what you're looking for, it doesn't change that fact, that's a fact. But the body and the mind oftentimes need to be turned down. And I've talked a lot about this before, but you might have not been here, okay? So this is good that you bring this up, yeah? Because the thing is, when it comes to unstillness and dealing with, like what you're saying, dramatic thinking and things, that thinking is not your thinking, essentially. That's like a condition. The mental system is conditioned to move and interpret and perceive life in a certain lens, let's say. But every body is viewing through the lens of self-centeredness. That's for sure. Yeah? Now the thoughts that are akin to your brand of self-centeredness might be a little bit different than somebody else's, but it's still self-centered, yeah? So the idea of dealing with thoughts, let's say, from the view of inquiry, is looking at the thinker. Because thoughts are coming and going and they're conditioned. There's no doer of those thoughts, yes? But really what binds us to the thoughts is the idea of being the thinker of those thoughts. So this is not so much, in my view, about dealing with thinking. It's just a looking at the thinker, the doer, the idea of being the seer, hearer, taster, toucher, feeler. The idea of the independent, autonomous, everlasting idea of J, of a self, of me. Yeah? So thoughts and things come after that sense of me. It's like Ramana would say, the first thought is me. Yeah? So this is like the view of non-duality. Now, if the thinking is very loud, if a person lives way high up in their body, sorry, if the emotions are very frantic, inquiring into the thinker or the sense of me can't really be done because everything else is too loud. So that's where method comes in. And this is the thing in non-duality I find is not talked about so much. Most people, in my experience, need to practice method in order to settle this system down and then move into inquiry. So this is why I do the chanting thing and talk about listening a lot, because the method of meditative listening can settle this system down a lot. There's a few things that have worked best for me. Oh my gosh, sorry. I just finished the chanting thing and sometimes my voice gets a little, anyways. There's a few things that worked best for me. One is Haku and soft butter method, because most people live too high up in their body and they're just living and thinking. They have no attunement to the actual body itself. So that settles and softens the body down. It also softens the senses. But primarily it just relaxes the system. And then very open listening, like what we do in the chanting stuff, helps settle the mind. And then inquiry can come, yeah? But if the system of thinking or emotions, or even where you live in your body is super high up, then moving into inquiring about the one who is thinking, or the idea of me or I, is it just gets taken up by the mental system and used sort of like more fire for the head to just cook on. Yeah. So if you're finding that your system, mental and physical, is too frantic, then go to method rather than going straight to inquiry or non-duality. Because a lot of times this thing needs to be turned down, and then you can inquire into a turned down, more quiet system. Yeah, because really, when it comes to thinking, like you're saying, the unstillness and the little self and these things, yeah, or let's say dramatic thinking. This message is not about really the thinking. It's inquiry into who the thinker is. Yeah, because in a very direct way, those thoughts are not your thoughts, because there's not a you. You see, but to inquire into the you, the thinking has to be settled down. Otherwise, the inquiry into the sense of you gets taken by the head and used as more thinking. Inquiry and the message of not to, in a way, is very quiet and soft. It's not like you're not repeating who am I, what am I all day. Yeah? You repeat that a few times and then there's a break there in a way. There's a pause. As they would say in recovery, there's a pause, yeah? And that pause sits there until something comes up and then you inquire again. But it doesn't take long for inquiry to become quite quiet. But the mental system will never permanently shut down. This inquiry and things, to me, are not about making this still. This thing does not, the body and the mental system do not stay still. They might get glimpses or take little breaks, yeah? But that is not the stillness which pervades. So this is not about making the body and the mind still. It's seeing that you're not the body and the mind, and that there is a stillness in which this system arises. And then really, to be honest, you don't care so much about what the head is doing, because you sit back into the stillness. But the bondage to the movement of the mental system, let's say, or the idea of the body and the mind, is through the idea that it's my body and mind, me. Yeah? So the inquiry is into the me. It's not so much into the thinking, it's into the thinker. It's not into the hearing of sounds, it's into who is hearing those sounds. Yeah? So if the thinking is really frantic, it's hard, even Ramana Maharshi would say that he would give people things to do, which is not always seated meditation, by the way. Yeah? He made Annamalai Swami essentially build a friggin' ashram, because Annamalai had so much energy, he had to burn that off as a sort of a method before he could really get into inquiry. So different people need different things, but I can only share what's worked for me. Because the inquiry is into the sense of me. It's not into the thinking. It's into the sense of me. So that's really what the message is about. It's looking at whatever pops up in two-ness and negating that as what we are. So I'm not the thinking, nor am I the thinker who believes they're seeing the thinking. I'm just going to look at the thing here. Not the mind being preoccupied. Right. Continuing to accept that you're not the mind. You cannot accept that you're not the mind. The idea of you, the idea of Jay, cannot accept that it's not the mind. Yeah? So you, in many ways, are not what gets the message. Yeah. This message of not to is about you. It's not to you. It's to what you are before the idea of you. So continuing to accept that you're not the mind, who is the one who's trying to accept that they're not the mind? The answer to that question would be me. Yeah? The inquiry is into the me. me, Jay, cannot accept that it's not the mind because its only existence, its perceived existence to itself is the mind. Yeah? So that would be like the mind killing itself, which it will not do. So the more you try to accept that you're not the mind, in many ways, the more you're getting bound to being the mind. It's like in recovery, they say stop playing God. But when somebody tries to stop playing God, that is the God. Except it's a false God, as Ramana would say. So the idea of accepting that you're not the mind, that is the mind trying to accept that it's not a mind, and the mind can't do that, you see? So when that arises, it would just be negated. The thing about that, what you're saying there, accepting that you're not the mind, that will never end. So that's probably what you're talking about when you're saying the mind is dramatic thinking in these things. You cannot accept that you're not the body, yeah? You negate that you are the thought, that you're the mind, and you negate that you are the seer of the thought, that you're not the mind. And then there you are as you've always been. This is not about becoming, this message. The message itself is about you are what you're looking for. Being ourselves reality. Being is present now. Yeah, it's not becoming. So continuing to accept would be the idea of becoming. And that won't work in many ways because you cannot accept that you're not the mind. Because that's actually the mind trying to accept that it's not the mind. And just to be clear, mind in Buddhism is like big M mind, which would be our nature. So you're not the thought that you are the mind, nor are you the action of trying to accept that you're not the mind. Though both of those would be negated, because in a way you can perceive them, yes? Those are perceived, and whatever is being perceived is not what is perceiving. So if there's that will continue on forever. If you move from the idea of I have to accept that I'm not the mind, because that's actually more mind more brain. That's the brain is trying to get out of the brain, which it cannot get out of. Self cannot get out of self. The brain will never get out of the brain, and J will never get out of J, because it only has one move, which is J. Yeah? This is why, this is why oftentimes method is useful to settle down the system, because otherwise you are going to continue to try to get out of yourself as a mental system. It's like your head wants to be there when you disappear, but it can't do that, you see? It doesn't happen that way. This is self trying to get out of self, which it cannot. So what is trying to accept that it's not the mind is the mind. And the mind cannot accept that it's not the mind. That's just more mind. And that will induce a lot more thinking. So it's really the move that's worked, let's say if there was any sort of non-move, it's negation. So when the thinking comes up, I'm not the thinking, and then there's the idea that I'm seeing the thinking, nor am I the seer of the thinking, because there is no seer of the thinking. Yeah, it's like there's a Suzuki thing, Shunryu Suzuki. You exist as an idea in your mind. You exist only as an idea. So really, it's an idea is trying to accept that it's not an idea, which is only ideas. So it can't work that way, yeah? You exist only as an idea. So if you try to get out of being an idea as more ideas, that just binds you to the idea-making machine, essentially. So in recovery, they say it beautifully. Self can't get out of self. Individuality can't get out of being an individual. So the mental system might be moving a lot. That's true. The body's moving a lot. Emotions are moving. Sensation, all this stuff is moving. But you are not that. So the thing that's works best is a negation, essentially. Yeah. So when like Ramana or Nisargadatta or somebody says be still, you might get a second of that, and then whatever moves, it gets negated rather than going with it. Yeah. So whether it's the senses or the mental or something, you don't go with it. Accepting that you're not the mind is a movement. So that would bind you more to being the idea of being the doer of becoming not the mind. That's going to bond you more to the mind, let's say, or the individuality. I don't really use the word mind because it's big M mind in Chan Buddhism is what you are. So the mind thing is a bit confusing. But yeah, I don't know if that helps at all, but it brings up an important point that you essentially can't get out of yourself as a body. J cannot get out of J. So if J is trying to accept the idea that J is not the mind, that will go on forever, and it will induce tons of mental anxiety because it continues to try to get out of itself. There's a seeing of the mental system, yeah? And because there's a seeing of it, there must be something seeing the mental system, essentially. So when the head comes up, rather than meeting it with more mind, it's not touched, essentially. Don't touch the movement is really the negation. But if the head is too busy, if the mental system is too frantic, the whole system needs to be calmed down. And that's where method becomes useful. Like maybe meditation, but I can only share what the stuff that's really worked for me, which is essentially the haku and relaxation, because it sits you downward in the body. And it turns down the volume a lot of the mental system, and the whole kind of nervous system gets settled. And then very open listening, because whatever is heard is not what's hearing. Yeah? And listening is very open, it's very receptive. Any thought is very outgoing. It kind of moves outward from the body. The senses move outward, and our nature is open stillness, yeah? That's not coming or going. So whatever's coming or going would get negated as what you are. So if you send me a message or something, I can send you that. There's just a basic text from Eikaku Hakuen, I think his name was. Very important in Rinzai Zen, an important figure. But he wrote a text called Yasankana. And that very short text has some very influential things in it. But yeah, you just send me a message and I can send you the stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Because the message of Not To is not about playing with the mind. Nor is inquiry, by the way. Inquiry is into the one who the mind arises to. Yeah, so when we say inquiry, I'm talking about like Ramana Maharshi's who am I? Yeah. Who am I? Inquiry stops, essentially. There's a bunch of pauses. If inquiry becomes a mantra, and Ramana talks about this in some of his stuff, that's not what inquiry is meant to be. Because the head cannot get out of the head, and the body cannot become a not body. The message of Not To is you're not the body and the mind. You're not that movement. And maybe the overarching message is like the Ramana being ourselves reality. Or you are what you're looking for. Being ourselves reality is a now. You are the space of nowness. It's not becoming reality. I'm not going to do a bunch of stuff to become reality. So you already are what you're looking for, yeah? So any method is essentially a regression or a reduction of what you're not. Yeah. So when I talk about the Haku and soft butter method, it's a very deep relaxation right into the core of yourself and downward in the body, because you're softening and letting go of your grip on the physical body, of which you're not. Yes? And then very open listening. Man, it's so beautiful. Because you're not the mental system, and the open listening sits you back. It disentangles you from the senses and the physical body. And it sits you back into the very open, spacious listening of your nature, which is big M mind. And then you see your ideas as what you are move through that, essentially, without touching it. Yeah. Because the message of not to is often heard, it's always heard actually, by the mental system. The mental system grabs on to the message. So if the message is being ourselves reality, the mental system grabs on to that. Yeah? And oftentimes it says, I am reality, which is not the message. Whatever grabs on or hears this message and tries to get it or thinks it has it or thinks it's going to become it, all of that is not you. So any method is really a reduction of what you're not. It's a seeing of what you're not, let's say, yeah? So in the soft butter method, when you're relaxing the body downward, you're letting go of your grip on the body of which you're not. And with open listening, that's beautiful because it starts with sound, but then you see that your mental system moves through and you can hear that. And it very quickly puts down the grasping on that mental system to sit back into the space of what you are already, which is open listening. Yeah? But because we're identified as the body and the mind, negation is necessary in many ways, because that needs to be, the identification with the body and the mind needs to be negated. So the methods are to settle down the body and the mind so that the body and the mind can then be negated. Very beautiful in a way. Otherwise, you're going with the head trying to become something. And the head is trying to become something that it can't become. Because the mental system sees itself as an existent thing. The idea of me is seen as an existent thing. It's a non-existent thing, but it takes itself to be an existent thing. It's mistaken, yes? And then I'm identified as that non-existent thing, which is telling me I'm a thing. So if I try to get out of a non-existent thing that's taking itself to be a thing, it's tying me more to the idea that it's a thing. Yeah. Is there any other thing you want to ask or add on to that? Or anybody for that matter, if anybody's still here, I'm not sure. But you can see your mental system constantly trying to acquire. So when you say that I need to continue to accept that I'm not the mind, that is the head trying to acquire. The mental system is trying to become a not mental system. It's doing that by trying to accept that it's not a mental system, which is reifying its own stance as a mental system in many ways. I'm going to become the one who's not an I, but I cannot get out of I. That's the meaning of self cannot get out of self. Yeah. So if there's any other questions or something, please ask. In many ways, this is why the message of not to, a lot of people don't they leave it quick. because their mental system has them trying to attain spirituality. It has the idea that that they as a body are going to become a spiritual body, let's say, or spirit. But the body is a body, yeah? And the brain is a brain, and the mental system is a conditioned movement, and it's dualistic. So a lot of people are trying to become a non-duality, yeah, but as a dualistic system, which is exactly what I need to accept that I'm not the mind is doing. That's a system of two-ness, trying to become not two, which it cannot do. So negation is really the only thing that can happen. Because even if you look at the sentence, I need to accept that I'm not the mind. Yeah? So I is obviously in the center, and then I am going to accept that I'm not the mind. But I is entangled with the mind. So the more it tries to accept that it's not the mind, the more frantic it gets, because it cannot get out of itself. You see? You are not the mind, mental system in this case, nor are you the one trying to get out of that mental system. Those are both not you. So you negate the mental system, which is, let's say, thinking, and then you negate that you're the one, or I, me, who is seeing that mental system. The one trying to get out of the thinking, or the one trying to get into something else, you are not that. Huh? Now that inquiry into who is that one needs to happen inside the body. So if you're living just way up high, and you're in thinking all the time, the inquiry does not come down to the body. It's getting folded around itself in the mental. Because the sense that there's an I that needs to accept that it's not something puts you right away in the stance of two. There's a me that has to accept that I'm not that. So that's two, yeah? This message is not two. You're not that, and you're not that either. But as long as the I is trying to get out of the thinking, you are bonded to that I-ness. And I cannot get out of I as I. You are not the body and the head, is the message. But like we were saying before, if the mental system and the nervous system are too jacked up or too loud and too frantic, anxious, then that inquiry gets folded into itself and causes more anxiety. That's why relaxation and inhabiting your body is very important. And then listening is great, because listening is not a mental movement. So when you're listening to sound, yeah, you're just listening, like opening the senses, not going out or in. There's listening. And then something comes up and starts to, let's say, interpret the sound, identify the sound, perceive the sound. The mental system's moving, yeah? So listening is wide open, and then the head comes up and starts to interpret. But you can listen to the head. So you mustn't be that, yeah? Nor mustn't listening actually be happening with the ears. Yeah. So who is the one interpreting the sound? It's always going to come back to the I. And this investigation is really into the sense of me. It's into the sense of me or I, not into the thinking. So if there's the sentence like before, I need to accept that I'm not the head. Well, that's going to bind you more to the I, which is trying to get out of the head. But the I is part of the head. It's like the Ramana screen and movie thing. Yeah? When people hear that or read that, it's often taken that I am the screen. But the I that's they're identified with is the body. Yeah? So there's thinking, and then there's the sense that I'm seeing the thinking. Yeah, so from that's one step back, the I, which is saying it's the screen, is not the screen. It's part of the movie. And then they continue to try to get out of the movie as the I, which is part of the movie. And it doesn't work. It causes tons of anxiety. Yeah. You, the sense of you, is part of the movie that you're trying to get out of. And when you try to get out of the movie as the sense of the body, the individual I, you get more entangled with the movie. That causes tons of anxiety. Yeah. That causes tons of anxiety. Because the mental system is already very anxious. It doesn't need extra wood on the fire of anxiety. But trying to get out of the body as a body will make it super anxious. And it will continue to do it, but you're not the body. Yeah. So the inquiry has to stay on the me, or the sense of I. Because it's going to try to continue to accept that it's not the head. And in many ways it can continue. But it still doesn't mean you're that. There was a cool Nisargadatta thing too I just saw here. Yeah, he says, before you think you are, in the space all movements happen, and for any appearance or movement, the space must be there. So in the space, all movements happen. So obviously, the thinking is moving, yeah? And then there's another movement which goes, I'm seeing the thinking, which arises in the space. Space isn't doing anything, it's just there, and things appear in space. So we see the thinking, and that's quite obvious to most people. And then they go, I'm seeing the thinking. But the I is another appearance in space. Yeah? So when the head goes, I need to accept that I'm not the head, you can see all of that. You can see the mental system, the thinking, and you can see the I come up, appear in the open space, and try to get out of itself. Yeah. That's all being heard, not by the ears, but by the space which is already there. Find that again. Before you think you are, in the space all movements happen. For any appearance or movement, the space must be there. So the space in which you already are, A-R-E, I have an East Coast accent a lot. In the space which you already are, that is ever present. And then what appears in that space comes and goes. But what comes and goes within that space is based on the first coming and going, which is the sense of I or me. Now the I or me is part of the coming and going, which is moving within stillness. So the coming and going, the sense of I or me, and what comes after it, which is the whole world and all thought and the idea of the body in the first place, are all coming and going within space. Now you are already the space. So the only thing that can be done is a negation of what appears in space. Yeah? And a negation would be a correction of a misidentification with what you're not. Beautiful. Beautiful in a way, yeah? So relaxing the body is already starting to negate the body as what you are. Relaxing the senses. And then listening, open listening, is beautiful, because open listening is like the space in which all movements happen. And you can hear all movements because they're moving, yeah? So there's this kind of this still open space which can know all movement. Otherwise, how would we know movement? You can only know movement with an opposition, which is open, still space. Now this is saying you already are that open, still space. You're identified with what's moving. So negating that identification will sit you back into what you already are. The thing is, what's moving is trying to become open, spacious stillness. But it cannot become that because you are already that. You are identified with what is moving, but your true, let's say, identity is open, still space. And what is moving is what you're not. So it's by negating the movement in which you sit back into what you already are, which is open, still space, which is aware of all of the movement. Yeah? And it's a done deal in many ways. So really this thing just needs to be negated. And in this life, what's worked best is Hakuin, soft butter method, and open listening. Because when you're listening, you hear movement, whether that be movement of sound, mental movement, emotional movement, sensation, you hear it. And when it's heard, you can negate it as what you are. Meaning don't touch it, yeah? And that sits you into the space in which that movement is moving, in which you've always been that open space. So when the head is trying to get out of being the head, that's all movement. And it will never get out. It will never become still. It might still for like a second or two if you're lucky. But after that, it's moving. So it cannot stabilize as stillness. Yeah? The space in which it moves is already still. And you are already that. But we are misidentified with what's moving. Which takes us back to the beginning. Most people, when they come to this message, try to become still as what's moving, which is the idea me. I'm going to become stillness. You are not going to become stillness. Your nature is already stillness. You are going to negate what you think you are, and that will sit you back into the stillness of which is your nature. That's so beautiful to me. Nisargadatta says this too, and I forget where he says it, but it hits super hard. He says, after listening to my talks, do you acquire knowledge, or is whatever knowledge you had being dissolved? It is being dissolved. Exactly. This is not about becoming or acquiring. It's being dissolved. The knowledge that I have of what I think I am gets dissolved, and then there I am in which I've always been looking for, which I've always been, which is the open space in which movements happen. That open space in which movements happen, open stillness, is ever-present listening to what is moving, essentially. Okay, just let me look at the chat here. When you look at it from this perspective, you understand it clearly as far as by being more instead of doing. Yes, so in that then, who is the one who's trying to be? Who is it that is trying to be? Because this is saying you are what you're looking for already. So who is trying to be still? I. Does that make sense to you, Kay? I am trying to be still. So I cannot be still. J is not still. It's part of the movement. When we look at this message, we're looking at what you're not, because it's the only thing that we can see. Because you already are what's aware of everything. Yeah? But what you're not is the only thing you can really become aware of. And then negate that. So you understand it clearly as far as by being more than doing. That's right in a way, but what is trying to be is the question, yeah? I. That sense of I gets negated. In many ways, don't touch it, yeah? And then the being, the ever-present beingness is always there. Because otherwise, your head will grab this message and now the mental system will go, okay, now I'm going to be. And it can't be. So when you sit down and, like, let's say, sit with the idea of be still or be quiet, yeah? You can't do that. The body, you as a body can't do that. The mental system cannot be still. You might get a second or two and then it's going to go again. So to go from the idea of, okay, now I have to be still as a body, it's not going to work because it can't be still. When they say be still, they say be still as what you are, which is already open stillness, but not as the sense of I. Does that make sense to you in a way? So when your head right now is trying to get this and understand it, you are not what's trying to grasp this. What's trying to grasp this cannot grasp this. That's why every time you ask a question, we highlight that point. Who is the one who's going to try to be still? Who is the one who's trying to accept that they're not the brain or the mental? There, yes. Great. When you come to a talk like this, it can give a lot of relief. Not because you're thinking about it, but because the message of not to is highlighting something to you. So you're listening to the message and then you see it in real time. Your head is trying to get this. It's trying to say, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, yeah? You're seeing that when you're at a talk that's highlighting that movement. That's the thing. That's the beauty of satsang in many ways. It highlights what's currently happening, and then it says, you see what's happening? You're not that. You are the space in which that's happening. And if you are already the space in which is hearing all that, in many ways the deal is done. But you can see the mental system continue to try to get out of itself. It's saying, I understand or I don't understand, yeah? Great. And if it's saying, I understand, then it's going to go, okay, now I'm going to do a bunch of stuff to make this understanding solid. No, I'm not that movement which is trying to do that. If you feel like you don't understand this movement, you are not the one who doesn't understand. And when the head goes, I don't understand, now I need to do a bunch more stuff, you are not that one either. Huh? So it's beautiful. You sit in satsang, you hear the message, and it's not through more thinking and understanding, but you hear the message in real time and you see your system trying to do it. That is the open listening, not effortful, pointed listening, but you can hear what the message is highlighting, yeah? Because the satsang really is about what you're not. It's highlighting what you're not so that you can negate it, so that you can see the hearing in many ways. Yeah. That's beautiful. Ending a lot of things has caused more anxiety. Yes. Knowledge from a mental standpoint will create way more anxiety, for sure. Because that is the mental system trying to get out of the mental system through itself, which it cannot do. This is why this Nisargadatta thing is really beautiful in a way, if I can find it again. He says, after listening to my talks, do you acquire knowledge, or is whatever knowledge you have being dissolved? It's being dissolved. That's right. Because what is trying to acquire knowledge is not you. And in many ways, we're trying to get relief from that friggin' thing which is constantly trying to acquire knowledge. Because it's super heavy. Yeah? You can't know your way into yourself, into what you are, as open spaciousness. Yeah? Because you are open spaciousness. What is trying to know that is not you, and it can't know it. The mental system cannot know what you are. That's why they say you're not going to get this message. You, as a mental system, as a sense of me, are not going to get this message. This message is about that and negating that as what you are. You can hear all of that. You can hear the mental system. You can hear the sense of individuality and the me-ness come up. You can hear all that from before it, which is the open space. Yeah? That's like as far as we can step back, and then as they would say in Advaita, the grace will do the rest. Yeah? Beautiful. That's why listening, I feel, is so beautiful, because the open space is already completely hearing everything that's arising and moving around in it. But we're so busy being identified with the moving, the gaining of knowledge, the idea of me, that we don't even recognize the open space in which it moves. In many ways, we've completely stopped listening, and we're completely addicted to talking. Talking equating to thinking, yeah? And then the thinking really thinks it's going to think its way out of thinking. The system really, really believes that. And it will continue to try, but it will never work, because self cannot get out of self. And this message is not about getting out of self. It's that you're not self in the first place. Advaita or not two is not getting free as a person. It's seeing that you're not a person. Yeah. That there is no individual personhood. But it's great to talk about all the moves it tries to make, getting out of itself, because it will continue. So if you're identified with the system which is trying to get out of itself, you're going to keep trying to get out of yourself forever. It will never stop, because self can't get out of self, yeah? So it's not getting free as self. This is freedom from self, which in many ways is already done. But the negation as of the me, of the sense of I, which is arising and appearing, you're just not that. That sometimes needs method, because this thing needs to be quieted down. That's beautiful. And settling downward in the physical body is very important in tons of schools, like all of Buddhism pretty much. Yeah, as far as method is concerned, that already negates a lot of stuff. Annamalai Swami said, master your senses, and it negates 70% of your vasanas. Vasanas being like the mental whatever, yeah? 70% is a lot, just by not going out with your senses. That's a big amount, yeah? So, settling downward, softening the body, and then learning how to listen rather than go with what's being heard. That ends tons of stuff, yeah. That ends tons of stuff, because the inquiry into the me needs to be inside the body. If the senses are active and pulling you outside of the body, you can't inquire into the thinking or the one who the thinking's arising to, because the main bondage is with the body. So, yeah. I'm a big believer in method until you don't need method anymore. And there's a few which have really stuck out to me as like glaringly useful. All right. Is there anything else? Or? Well, send me a message, and just send me a message after this, and we can chat. If there's no other questions, maybe we'll wrap it up there today, because that's good. That's a lot of is good. All right. So thanks so much, Kay. He's the only one who's written in the chat. I'm not sure who else is here, but hopefully this stuff. The message of not two is what really landed. That's because I saw kind of what we're talking about I tried for a long time to get out of myself as a self, and it didn't work, and it made me super uncomfortable. And seeing that there is no self really is the thing, yeah. And settling down the system, and rather than moving to like an active outgoing thing, to open up to open listening is fantastic. Because you can hear the head, you can hear the sense of I, you can hear all that. And as soon as what's being heard is not what's hearing, you don't touch it. You don't interface with it anymore. And there's a lot of relief in that.